Before the events that changed my life, my world revolved around the comforting regularity of small-town life. I grew up in a house that seemed to have a story for every creak of its wooden floors and every mark on its walls. My father built it from the ground up, brick by brick, pouring his soul into every detail. He always said, "A home is only as strong as the effort you put into it." That sentiment stuck with me through the years, influencing the way I approached everything: my career, my relationships, and my future. My love for electronics started when I was 10, tinkering in the workshop my dad set up in the basement. Those hours spent dismantling radios and repairing outdated TVs taught me more than just technical skills. They showed me the joy of solving problems. I thought the world was as straightforward as circuits and wiring. Follow the connections and you'll find the answers. But life has a way of throwing in complications no schematic could predict. The jury had just begun deliberations after hearing the final arguments from both sides. It was already late in the afternoon, around 4 p.m., so the judge decided to send the jury back to their hotel, where they had been sequestered throughout the 2-week trial. The case marked the end of an investigation that had stretched on for nearly a year. The defendant was returned to the Tarrant County Correctional Center in Fort Worth, and the courtroom activity ceased until the jury would reconvene on Monday. With nothing else to do, I decided to head back to my hotel, the Hilton Garden Inn in downtown Dallas. On the way, I stopped at a bar for a quick meal and a beer. I had just finished my burger and was halfway through my drink when a familiar voice behind me caught my attention. Turning around, I immediately recognized her. It was Ashley Marks, a close friend from high school whom I hadn't seen in over 17 years. Back in the day, we'd been inseparable, along with Steve Jenkins and Jolene Carter, calling ourselves the Four Musketeers. But our tight-knit group had dissolved when Ashley moved to Austin during senior year, and we'd lost touch. We caught up quickly. Ashley had graduated from the University of Texas, gotten married and divorced, and was now working as a reporter for the Austin Statesman. Her humor was as sharp as ever, particularly when recounting her ex-husband's infidelity and eventual fall from grace. Despite her sarcastic tone, it was clear she had moved on. She then mentioned her reason for being in Dallas, covering the Jenkins trial. "I saw you testify," she said, bringing up the tragic fate of Jolene. It was sobering to revisit those memories, but Ashley's presence was oddly comforting. As the conversation shifted, Ashley surprised me with a proposition. She wanted to write my story, offering to act as a buffer between me and the relentless press. Her approach was thoughtful, promising editorial control and an exclusive agreement. While the attention from major media outlets had been overwhelming, something about her made me feel I could trust her. After some consideration, I agreed. Ashley then suggested a plan. She proposed we use the weekend to drive out to my hometown, a couple of hours west of Dallas. There, she could see where everything happened, meet my family, and gather details for the story. It sounded like a welcome distraction from the trial, so I agreed. We decided to grab a few essentials from our hotel rooms and meet by my truck in the parking lot. True to form, she teased me about my oversized blue pickup, a reminder of the Bill Jennings she'd always known. By the time we hit the road, the familiarity between us felt effortless, as if no time had passed since those carefree high school days. Night had already fallen as we merged onto Highway 20 toward Abilene, a relief for me since I've always hated driving under the glare of the sun. Ashley, now dressed in a denim skirt and a crisp white Western blouse, looked as striking as she had in high school. She caught me glancing at her legs, a brief moment that didn't go unnoticed. "Still the same cowboy, huh?" she teased with a knowing smile. I chuckled. Maybe some things don't change. Ashley shifted the conversation to the task at hand, placing a small recorder on the dashboard. "You mind if I record this?" she asked. I didn't, as I wanted her to get the details right. I began recounting my past, starting with high school. After Ashley moved away, it had been just me, Steve, and Jolene. Jolene and I got engaged right after graduation, and Steve and I enlisted in the Marines. We trained together in San Diego, but our paths split soon after. He joined the infantry while I trained in electronics, eventually landing at Quantico. Not long after, Steve returned home on medical leave, his knee injury ending his military career. His father's influence secured him a job with the county, which later launched his political career. I married Jolene after finishing training, and Steve was my best man, though, as I later learned, he played a much more intimate role in Jolene's life. Ashley winced at the revelation, and I pressed on, explaining how life unfolded. My military career took us to various bases. Jolene and I had 2 children, Brian and Jessica, during my deployments. At the time, I never questioned their resemblance to Steve. People always said Steve and I looked like brothers, so it didn't cross my mind. Ashley pointed out how clear the resemblance was in the photos she'd seen, but I explained that the truth only became apparent as the kids grew older. After my service, we returned to Texas, and I began working at my dad's computer store. The job required a lot of travel, which Jolene didn't seem to mind. In hindsight, it was likely because my absences gave her time to continue her affair with Steve, right in our home. Ashley was appalled, especially when I told her that Steve even had his own chair in the living room and was often referred to as Uncle Steve by the kids at Jolene's insistence. I paused before sharing the darker conclusion. When I found out, I didn't just confront her. I made sure to erase everything tied to that betrayal, her wedding dress, the mattress, the couch. All of it went up in flames. Ashley leaned back, processing my words. "I don't blame you," she said quietly. We drove in silence for a moment before I suggested a break. "I could use some fresh coffee. Want to stop?" She turned off the recorder and nodded. "Perfect. I could use a smoke." We pulled into a roadside diner, both needing a moment to recharge before continuing down memory lane. The highway stretched ahead as we merged back onto the road, continuing our drive toward Abilene after a quick stop. Ashley, ever the reporter, placed her recorder on the dashboard and leaned back, ready to dig deeper. "So, you had no idea Jolene and Steve were seeing each other all that time?" she asked. I shook my head. "Not a clue. Jolene never disrespected me outright. They were careful, probably had years to perfect their routine." "When did you finally find out?" she pressed. "About a year ago. I was in Los Angeles for a month-long training course. Jolene and the kids stayed home and kept in touch regularly. Calls, emails, even pictures. One weekend, Brian emailed me a photo from a fishing trip with Jolene and Steve. That's when I noticed it. I handed her my phone, guiding her to the album. "Take a look at this picture." Ashley examined the photo of Brian holding a bass, Steve sitting next to him, and Jolene standing on the other side with her hand on Steve's shoulder. "Oh my God," she murmured. "They look so alike, Steve and Brian. Same dimples, even." I nodded. "Exactly. But that wasn't all. Notice Jolene's hand?" Ashley zoomed in. "No rings," she said, puzzled. "Exactly. And I later found out where those rings ended up." I directed her to another photo folder. "Look for the ashtray." When she found the image, she gasped. "Is that her wedding ring and your great-grandmother's ring?" I nodded grimly. "Yep. And guess whose ashes are in that ashtray?" "Steve's," she guessed. "That's right. And here's the kicker. It was on my nightstand, which means Steve wasn't just in my house. He was in my bed, probably with Jolene." Ashley's eyes welled up. "How could she do that to you?" "Jessica was the one who found it," I explained. "She'd been helping my mom clean and snapped a picture before they left for the lake. She mailed me the rings at my request, but Jolene had no idea." Ashley let out a laugh. "I bet Jolene lost her mind over those rings." "She did. She even roped Steve into helping her search the house, digging through garbage and taking apart sink drains. They never figured it out." "And what did you do?" Ashley asked. "When I got home, Jolene was frantic, crying about losing her grandmother's ring. I played along, asking the usual questions. Did you check here? There? Then I pulled the rings out of my pocket." Ashley raised her eyebrows. "What did she say?" "She was stunned. I told her a trusted friend found them and mailed them to me. I didn't mention Jessica because I knew she'd take it out on her. Then I said, maybe don't leave them in the ashtray the next time Steve comes over." Ashley shook her head. "I can't believe you stayed calm." "That's when I realized it was over," I admitted. "I didn't have concrete proof yet, so I started gathering evidence. First, I arranged for DNA tests on the kids. I also set up surveillance, motion-activated cameras, audio recorders, and even bugged our phones. Everything was stored on my server and backed up in the cloud." "How did you get Steve's DNA?" Ashley asked. I smirked. "Easy. He came over that Sunday, as usual, and fell asleep in his chair. A quick cheek swab while he snored, and I had what I needed. The results came back a week later." Ashley leaned forward, clearly invested. "And?" I glanced at her, my jaw tightening. That's when everything unraveled. The DNA test confirmed what I'd begun to suspect. There was a 99.9% chance Steve was the father of both my kids. That meant his affair with Jolene had likely been going on for over 16 years. "You had no idea?" Ashley asked, incredulous. "Not a clue," I admitted. Looking back, I probably could have pieced it together, but she never gave me a reason to doubt her. Things seemed normal, good even, right up until the end. It wasn't until I started digging that the truth surfaced. I explained how I set up surveillance in the house. It didn't take long to catch them. While I was in Oklahoma City on a work trip, Jolene invited Steve over. I checked in with her earlier, and she assured me everything was fine, even saying she loved me. But by 9 p.m., I was watching them together, on camera, in my bed. Hearing their casual remarks and laughter hurt more than the betrayal itself. Ashley shook her head. "What did you do after that?" Before I could answer, I focused on the road ahead. It was dark and narrow, with no streetlights or guardrails. The stretch was known for wildlife and the occasional run-in with Steve's old associates. Most had been dealt with after his death, but I wasn't taking any chances. I flipped on the high beams, activated the light bar, and retrieved my Magnum from the glove box. We finally reached my house, and Ashley noticed a car parked in the driveway. "Who's that?" "Security," I said. "They've been watching the place since Steve's arrest. Some of his friends tried causing trouble, but we shut that down quickly." As we parked, an officer stepped out of the car. "Bill Jennings? Thought you were still in Dallas for the trial." "The jury's deliberating," I explained. "This is Ashley Marks, a reporter from the Austin Statesman. She's here to write an article." He tipped his hat. "Nice to meet you, ma'am. It's been quiet since the Rangers cleaned things up, but we're keeping watch. Let me know if you need anything." After exchanging a few words, Ashley and I entered the house. I gave her a tour explaining its history. Built in 1866 by my great-great-grandfather, the house had been expanded and updated over the years, though traces of the original structure remained. It now had 5 bedrooms, a modern kitchen, and a covered porch. I suggested Ashley take the master bedroom, the only one with an attached bathroom, while I'd sleep on the futon in my office. It was where I'd been sleeping ever since learning about Jolene's betrayal. Ashley dismissed the idea. "Nonsense. The bed's big enough for both of us. We're adults. We can handle it." Her confidence caught me off guard, but I relented. "If you're sure." With a smile, she led me to the living room. "Now, let's get back to your story." "Let me call the kids first," I said. "They should know we're coming by tomorrow." After calling my parents and chatting with the kids, we confirmed plans to visit them for lunch the next day. I grabbed some coffee and walked into the living room, bringing a small stack of DVDs from the study. They were kept locked away for good reason. "This will give you everything you need," I told Ashley, setting them down. Her eyes widened. "How much evidence do you have?" "Plenty," I said. "Footage from the house, office security recordings, scanned documents, photos, audio files, you name it. I've made multiple backups just in case." I selected one DVD, checked the label, and slid it into the player. "This one is graphic. Be prepared." Ashley nodded, bracing herself as I hit play. The video opened with Jolene entering the bedroom, followed by Steve. She removed her rings and tossed them into the ashtray on my nightstand. Steve smirked, stubbing out his cigarette on them. "Screw him and his great-grandmother's ring," Jolene said. Steve laughed. Ashley winced, tears welling in her eyes. As the scene escalated, I fast-forwarded through the worst parts. She gave me a grateful look. "This clip is about an hour," I said. "The real punch is in their pillow talk." By the time the footage slowed, Jolene and Steve were lying back, cigarettes in hand. Jolene turned toward him. "I'm pregnant again," she said. "Looks like you're going to be a daddy." Steve frowned. "Didn't you take the pill?" "Maybe I missed a couple of days," Jolene admitted. "But that's it," Steve groaned. "Why not use a protection?" "You know I hate those things," she replied. "But I can't have another pregnancy termination. The last one almost liquidated me, and Bill had a vasectomy because of you." Steve shrugged. "Then convince him it's his kid, or leave him and marry me." Jolene sighed. "That's all I've ever wanted, but I know you don't want that." "Exactly," Steve said. "Bill works and pays the bills. Why mess that up? He's too dumb to catch on anyway. We could do this in front of him and he wouldn't notice." Jolene hesitated. "What if we just get rid of him?" she asked. "An accident on Indian Trail, maybe poison?" Steve lit another cigarette. "We'll figure it out, but not until the kids are out of the house. Then we can take his insurance and whatever's left of his business. For now, let's play it smart." Jolene agreed, and the scene descended into another round of coupling. I stopped the video, unable to stomach anymore. Ashley was shaking her head, tears streaming down her face. "I hate her," she whispered. "How did you live with that for 17 years? Please tell me you saw a lawyer after this." I nodded. "I did. That day changed everything. Let me explain." I recounted my visit to Alan Jackson, the family lawyer who had handled all our affairs. What he revealed shook me to my core and set the stage for what came next. The meeting with Alan began straightforwardly enough, but it quickly took a turn. I showed him the evidence, the DNA report and video of Jolene's affair with Steve. Alan laid out my legal options, explaining that, while Texas is a community property state, I could pursue divorce on grounds of adultery or cruelty. Adultery wasn't a crime, but it could heavily influence property division and alimony. He even noted it could be used in civil litigation. But then Alan got to the real issue. "Bill," he said, "the law is on your side, but Steve is the problem. He runs this county like a personal fiefdom. He controls the sheriff's department and most of the judges. You'd have to file in this county since you've lived here for 90 days, but I don't think you'll find a judge willing to take the case. And with Jolene's pregnancy, the courts won't finalize anything until the baby is born, regardless of paternity." He paused before continuing. "Steve already knows you might pursue a divorce. He's made it clear that I'm to report any attempts you make." I stared at him. "Are you saying Steve ordered you to violate attorney-client privilege?" Alan nodded reluctantly. "Bill, I don't like it, but I'm not willing to end up buried on Indian Trail. You don't know what you're up against." I stood, anger simmering. "I'm sorry, Alan, but I don't have a choice. You're fired. I'll need all the family and business files, and I want them now." To his credit, Alan had anticipated this. He gestured to 2 boxes by the door. "Everything's ready," he said, scribbling a note on a piece of paper and handing it to me. "Call the people on this list. They're interested in Steve's activities." Alan helped carry the boxes to my truck. Before leaving, he looked around nervously. "Bill, Steve's likely keeping tabs on you. Be careful." I shook his hand. "Thanks, Alan. I'll take it from here." Driving back, I mulled over what Alan had said. I wasn't concerned about firing him. My father would understand. Steve, however, was a different story. I called the numbers Alan had given me and arranged meetings with a high-powered family lawyer, a state prosecutor, and a senior Texas Ranger, all based in Dallas. At home, I told my dad about firing Alan and showed him the evidence. His reaction was immediate. "Holy hell! I knew Steve was bad, but not like this. Get the kids out of the house. There's no telling what they might try." We quickly made a plan. Dad suggested I tell Jolene I was heading to Phoenix for work while he stayed with the kids. I agreed, knowing I'd need to explain things to Brian and Jessica later. I called Brian's cell. "You and Jessica are staying with your grandparents starting today," I said. "What's going on, Dad?" "I'll explain later. Just be home right after school. Grandpa will pick you up." "Okay, Dad. Love you," he said. "Love you too, buddy." Minutes later, a text from my secretary popped up. "Bill, Steve Jenkins is here to see you." I prepared for the meeting by placing my Magnum on the desk within easy reach, turning on a hidden camera to record everything, and instructing my secretary to notify my father that Steve had arrived. Steve entered the office with his usual overconfidence, immediately noticing the 9mm Magnum on my desk. His smirk and casual demeanor betrayed his arrogance. Steve wasted no time addressing the reason for his visit. He revealed that he was aware of my meeting with Alan Jackson and made it clear that any attempt to divorce Jolene would face his interference. Steve insisted he wouldn't allow me to take him to court or expose their affair, regardless of what I knew. He dismissed my right to confront him, brushing off the betrayal as if it were trivial. What followed was a horrifying admission. Steve bragged about how his relationship with Jolene had started during our senior prom and continued sporadically after I enlisted in the Marines. He recounted the moments when their affair intensified, particularly while I was stationed away from home. He even claimed paternity of my children, casually recounting how they ensured Jolene's pregnancies aligned with their plans, including her vasectomy request to prevent her from having my children. With each detail, it became clear how deeply intertwined their deception was. Then Steve shifted from boasting to issuing a chilling threat. He outlined how he intended to take control of my life, dictating the terms of my marriage and even threatening harm to my children if I didn't comply. He flaunted his influence over the county, asserting control over law enforcement and the judicial system. His confidence in his power and impunity was undeniable. After Steve left, I stopped the recording and burned the footage to a DVD. Recognizing the gravity of the situation, I sent copies to my father and the contacts Alan had provided, including a high-powered family lawyer, a state prosecutor, and a senior officer in the Texas Rangers. I then called my father, informing him of Steve's threats and the urgency of the situation. Together, we decided to act immediately. The first step was to ensure the safety of my children. I contacted their school, emphasizing that neither Jolene nor Steve should be allowed to pick them up under any circumstances. This was followed by a call to my son, Brian, instructing him to collect his sister and head straight to their grandparents' house without delay. I reassured him that I would explain everything later, but stressed the importance of following my instructions without question. Armed with my magnum and the evidence, I left the office and drove directly home. During the drive, my thoughts raced, fueled by anger and a growing resolve to protect my family. When I arrived, Steve's truck was gone, but Jolene's car was in the driveway. It was a small relief, as it meant I could address the situation without immediate interference from Steve. I knew my father would arrive soon, ready to help me take the next steps in removing Jolene and securing the safety of my children. This was the turning point. As I entered the house, I moved cautiously, scanning for any signs of Steve or others who might be lurking with ill intentions. My right hand rested on my holstered magnum, ready for anything. The house seemed quiet at first, but then Jolene appeared, descending the stairs. Her expression shifted when she saw me. Feigning concern, she asked why I was home early. Her reaction changed quickly when I confronted her about Steve's possible presence, hinting at his involvement in setting me up for harm. Jolene's face paled as I revealed that I knew the truth about her and Steve. She stammered an apology, but I cut her off and set the record straight. I loaded the damning footage onto the TV, pressing play on Steve's smug confessions and threats. Jolene's feigned innocence melted as she scrambled for excuses, claiming Steve's words were empty and that we could work things out. Her pleas fell on deaf ears. The video was undeniable proof of her betrayal, and I was done tolerating her lies. Without raising my voice, I removed her wedding rings and threw mine into her hand. Jolene begged for forgiveness, but I shut her down and demanded she leave the house immediately. Grabbing her purse, I tossed it to her and escorted her out the door. Her protests continued as she asked where she could go, but I coldly told her to find solace with Steve or anyone else. Her fate was no longer my concern. As we stood in the driveway, 2 vehicles pulled in. My father's truck blocked access to the house, with Steve's arriving moments later. Steve barely avoided hitting my father's truck as he skidded to a halt. He exited his vehicle, only to be met by my father stepping out with a loaded rifle. My father made it clear that Steve was violating a restraining order requiring him and Jolene to stay 500 feet away from our property and family. Steve, unaccustomed to such defiance, froze as my father held his ground. The tension escalated when 2 state highway patrol cars arrived, their flashing lights cutting through the scene. 4 officers stepped out, armed and ready, and took control of the situation. One officer approached Steve with the restraining order in hand, while another addressed Jolene. They served her with the same document, instructing her to leave the property immediately or face arrest. I interrupted before the officers could leave, presenting a digital recorder. Playing back Jolene's recent threats against me and the kids, I made my case for her immediate arrest. The officer listened intently before cuffing Jolene and informing her of her Miranda rights. Steve, watching the scene unfold, became enraged as another officer moved to arrest him as well. His protests, claiming his power and influence, were dismissed outright by the law enforcement officials. Adding to Steve's humiliation, a local news crew arrived just in time to record the arrests. The footage, including Steve's belligerent outbursts, would later air on the evening news. As officers led him away, he shouted threats of retaliation, vowing to ruin anyone involved. Although I hadn't yet provided all the evidence of their plot against me, I knew my contacts in Dallas were already working on building a case. While the day had been chaotic, the arrests of Jolene and Steve marked the beginning of justice being served. As the news van repositioned to allow the patrol cars to leave, the reporter and cameraman approached me, my father following close behind. The reporter wasted no time, asking why Commissioner Jenkins had been arrested. I responded bluntly, explaining that threats to liquidate were felonies, even for prominent politicians. Without elaborating, I excused myself, citing the need to focus on my children. Walking away, I couldn't help but think about how Steve's carefully curated image of a family values champion had just been shattered. His supporters might not have known the real Steve Jenkins, but they were about to learn. At my parents' house, I sat my family down and explained everything. Telling Brian and Jessica the truth about Steve's paternity was gut-wrenching. They struggled to process it, but ultimately rejected the DNA results' significance. To them, I was their father, and nothing would change that. Their resilience and loyalty filled me with pride as we embraced, shedding tears together. After a heartfelt goodbye, I returned to my house, packed a few days' worth of clothes, and drove to Dallas for critical meetings. The next morning, I met Dave Brooks, the sharp Dallas attorney known for his aggressive courtroom tactics. To my surprise, he had already arranged a meeting with the state prosecutor, John Hancock, and Texas Ranger Captain Don Jacobs. Dave apologized for the sudden gathering, explaining that my recent evidence had accelerated their plans. John Hancock opened the meeting by expressing regret for what I'd endured. He then laid out the harsh reality. Steve Jenkins wasn't just a cheater, he was a criminal of the highest order. Evidence linked him to pills trafficking, illicit arms dealing, human trafficking, and sleeping for money. Even more horrifying, forensic investigations tied Steve to 6 murders. Jolene, my wife, wasn't just complicit. She had been actively involved, particularly in the sleeping for money ring. The timeline for building the case had been cut short by Steve's threats against me and my children, forcing law enforcement to act faster than planned. Don Jacobs detailed how deeply compromised the local sheriff's department had become under Steve's influence. Texas Rangers and DSS officers were temporarily replacing the department to stabilize the situation, even overseeing the jails where Steve and Jolene were being held. Time was critical to prevent further fallout. Dave shifted the focus to my divorce. He proposed pursuing an annulment based on Jolene's criminal behavior and deception. If annulment wasn't possible, he'd file for divorce on grounds of adultery and mental cruelty, ensuring I retained all assets and custody of the children. The meeting continued for another hour as we discussed strategy and potential outcomes. Before I left, Dave handed me a DVD containing damning footage of Jolene's actions, collected by both private and government investigators. He warned that some of the content was explicit and implicated multiple individuals, including local deputies. John was straightforward about his plans. He intended to seek the death penalty for Steve Jenkins. Jolene, he said, might escape with life imprisonment without parole. He also issued a stern warning. My life and my children's lives were at risk. Steve and Jolene had a history of eliminating those who got in their way. He urged me to remain vigilant and contact them immediately if I noticed anything suspicious. As I drove home, my mind raced with thoughts of betrayal and disbelief. Steve, once my best friend, was a murderer and a criminal mastermind. Jolene, the woman I had loved and trusted, had been his partner in nearly every atrocity. The weight of 17 years of lies pressed heavily on me. When I arrived back in town, my phone rang. Brian's panicked voice came through the line. He urged me to come home immediately but wouldn't explain. My stomach tightened as the call ended abruptly. I knew something was very wrong. Racing home, I arrived in under 20 minutes, my heart sinking as I saw an ambulance and highway patrol cars parked in front of the house. Memories of the warnings I'd received flooded my mind. Rushing to the door, I was stopped by paramedics wheeling a gurney out. When they pulled back the sheet, Jolene's lifeless face stared back at me. "She's gone," one paramedic said quietly. Oddly, I felt no grief. Inside, Steve was being carried out on another gurney, groaning in pain. His left shoulder had been shattered by a rifle blast, but he was alive. Ignoring him, I found my father and children standing together, shaken but unharmed. Relief washed over me as I embraced them, making sure they were okay before asking what had happened. My father explained that he had brought Brian and Jessica to the house to gather belongings when Steve and Jolene arrived. They had somehow managed to bail out of jail. A fight broke out between Jessica and Jolene, escalating when Steve pulled a tool. My father, hearing the commotion, entered with his rifle just as Steve's tool discharged, striking Jolene in the abdomen. Reacting quickly, my father fired at Steve, wounding him in the shoulder before calling emergency. Brian had called me shortly after. Jolene hadn't survived long, succumbing to her injuries before the ambulance arrived. Despite the chaos, my father reassured me that he had done what he could to protect everyone. I remembered that the home security system was still recording. Checking the footage, I confirmed the entire incident was captured. I shared the video with the responding officers, who asked me to make a copy for their investigation. Later, while recounting the events to Ashley over coffee, she asked to see the video. I played the footage, which began with Jolene and Steve entering the house, demanding that the children leave with them. Jessica, defiant, refused and stood her ground. When Jolene grabbed her, Jessica fought back, leading to a heated exchange. The confrontation escalated when Steve pulled a rifle and Jolene tried unsuccessfully to de-escalate the situation. Chaos erupted, with an exchange of fire claiming Jolene's life and wounding Steve. After the video ended, Ashley wiped away tears as I stood up, emotionally drained. Needing a break, I suggested stepping outside for some fresh air. Ashley followed, and we sat in silence on the back porch, sipping coffee under the night sky. Breaking the silence, Ashley remarked on the darkness and stillness, a stark contrast to her city life. Turning to me, she urged me to find a way to move forward before the pain consumed me. I admitted how hard it was to process the betrayal, feeling as though the life I had built was a lie. My children weren't even mine biologically. Ashley shared her own experience with betrayal, reminding me that not everyone was untrustworthy. She placed her arms around me, offering comfort and reassurance. Her presence was grounding, and I appreciated her support. We reflected on what might have been if life had taken a different course. Ashley admitted she had once been jealous of Jolene, and I confessed similar thoughts about her. We laughed at the irony and wondered how things might have turned out if we'd met under different circumstances. Looking at her, I realized how much I valued her presence in my life. For the first time in a long while, I felt a glimmer of hope. As the evening wound down, we returned to the house to relax. I opted to sleep on the couch, a habit I'd developed since Jolene's death. Though a DSS officer was stationed outside, I couldn't shake the unease that one of Steve's associates might try something. Besides, I wasn't ready to explore anything more with Ashley yet. She understood, teasing me lightly not to make it a routine. The next morning I woke to the aroma of bacon. Ashley stood over me, clad in a long t-shirt, announcing breakfast was ready. In the kitchen I found a feast: pancakes, bacon, sausage, grits, eggs, toast, and even cookies and gravy. She'd even remembered peanut butter for my pancakes. Sitting down, I marveled at the spread. Ashley quipped that it had been ages since she cooked for a man, making it clear her ex-husband never appreciated homemade breakfasts. I dove into the meal, savoring every bite, while we discussed the day's plans. Ashley wanted to visit my family, speak with Jolene's mother, and, if time allowed, stop by Jolene's gravesite. After breakfast, I showered and shaved, reflecting on Ashley's presence. She brought a calm and joy I hadn't felt in years. By the time we left for my parents' house, I found myself feeling unexpectedly content. When we arrived, Brian and Jessica ran out to greet us. I introduced them to Ashley and we headed inside. Ashley explained her intention to interview the family members individually and requested privacy for the conversations. My mom retreated to the kitchen, while my dad and I hung back, making small talk and avoiding heavier topics like Jolene or Steve. Ashley spent time with Jessica and Brian, then moved on to my parents. While she worked, the kids and I played soccer outside. Ashley eventually joined us, her natural bond with the kids evident. For a moment, it felt like I had a complete family again. After lunch, it was time to leave. As we prepared to go, Jessica pulled me aside and whispered that if I didn't ask Ashley to marry me, she'd take matters into her own hands. I promised her I'd think about it. On the drive, I asked Ashley how the interviews went. She explained that speaking to everyone privately allowed her to gather unbiased perspectives. She'd learned that my family had always supported me but had harbored suspicions about Jolene. However, they had refrained from interfering to avoid causing problems. Ashley also shared something chilling. Jessica confided that Steve had been giving her inappropriate attention for a while. My anger surged at the revelation, but Ashley's calm presence helped me focus. She emphasized how much she enjoyed the warmth of my family and thanked me for including her. We soon pulled up to the apartment where Jolene's mother, Myrna, lived. As we approached the door, Ashley declined a private interview, suggesting that this was a conversation Myrna and I needed to have together. I nodded, bracing myself for what was to come. Myrna Carter opened the door as soon as I knocked, moving slowly due to both her health and the weight of grief. She had been alone since Jolene's father died in a mysterious accident years ago, and Jolene's recent death had only deepened her isolation. I hugged her, asking how she was doing. She assured me she was fine before greeting Ashley warmly, complimenting her on how little she'd changed since high school. We sat down, and I explained Ashley's purpose for the visit. Myrna nodded, her expression a mix of sadness and resignation. When Ashley asked how long she had known about Jolene's affair with Steve, Myrna hesitated, her eyes dropping in shame. She admitted she had known almost from the start, recounting how Steve practically lived with Jolene during the year I was stationed in Okinawa. Myrna confessed she had warned Jolene she was making a mistake, but her daughter refused to listen. When I asked why Jolene hadn't left me if she wanted to be with Steve, Myrna explained that Jolene had loved us both in different ways. I represented stability and security, while Steve offered adventure and recklessness. Despite this, I couldn't reconcile Jolene's betrayal and deception, especially after discovering she had passed Steve's children off as mine and later conspired with him to harm us. Myrna insisted Jolene had loved me, at least at first, but admitted Steve's influence had grown over time, eventually taking control of her. Ashley pressed further, asking about Jolene's pregnancy termination. Myrna confirmed she knew about them and had tried to convince Jolene to divorce me. Jolene had dismissed the idea, laughing and saying she would inherit everything eventually. Myrna revealed this conversation had taken place about 1.5 years ago, indicating how long Jolene and Steve had plotted against me. I asked Myrna if her late husband had known about any of this. She believed he did, recalling a conversation he'd had with Steve shortly before his fatal car accident. Given her husband's meticulous care of his vehicles, the accident had always seemed suspicious. Investigators had never explained how a brake line failed or why the car lost traction. Myrna expressed her sorrow over Jolene's memorial service, which no one attended except her and a priest. She thanked me for covering the cremation costs, and noted how touched she was that Jolene had been cremated in her wedding dress. Ashley looked at me curiously and asked why I had done that. I explained that I thought it fitting, given the circumstances. I had burned the dress along with Jolene, along with her wedding ring, though I had left her engagement ring intact. Ashley seemed amused as she jotted down notes. Myrna also mentioned that Jolene had an IRA worth $350,000 and a separate savings account with $200,000. Funds I had only discovered after her death. I had set the money aside in a trust fund for the kids, ensuring their future education. Ashley, intrigued, made note of this as well. Before we left, Myrna apologized again for not speaking up sooner. I reassured her, encouraging her to visit the kids whenever she wanted. She hugged me and Ashley, thanking us for stopping by and asking us not to be strangers. As we drove away, Ashley couldn't resist asking again about the wedding dress. I simply replied, "It felt right at the time." Ashley focused on her notes while I headed to the cemetery. The grounds were quiet and pristine, leading us to the columbarium where Jolene's ashes were interred. A small granite plaque marked the spot, bearing only her name, birth year, and death year. There was no mention of her life, her roles, or her relationships. Ashley observed the simplicity of the marker and noted that at least her remains were treated with dignity. I explained that it was done more out of consideration for Myrna than Jolene. If it had been entirely my decision, I admitted, the ashes might have ended up in a less respectful place. Even the use of Jolene's maiden name on the plaque was deliberate. I felt it was fitting since she hadn't valued our family name during her life, so there was no need to attach it to her in death. Suggestions to inscribe phrases like loving wife and mother had been rejected because, frankly, they didn't reflect the truth. As we stood by the plaque, Ashley gently reminded me that there was still a lot of unresolved anger within me. She asked if I had ever truly grieved for Jolene. I admitted I hadn't. Any love I once had for her had been extinguished by years of betrayal, lies, and the threats she had made against me and the children. Saying it aloud brought a wave of shame, and emotions I hadn't allowed myself to feel began to surface. Fighting the tears, I turned away, but Ashley stopped me. She insisted that I let go of the pain before it consumed me. Her words hit a nerve, and everything I had been holding back came rushing out. For the first time since Jolene's death, I broke down completely. Ashley held me tightly, offering silent comfort as I sobbed. When I finally regained control, I noticed tears on her face as well. She reminded me that Jolene had been her friend too, once part of our group of close-knit friends. Despite everything Jolene had done, there was a part of Ashley that still mourned the person Jolene used to be. Ashley's presence grounded me. She reassured me that she was there, and she wasn't going anywhere. Her words offered a glimmer of solace, a promise of stability in the chaos my life had become. After a moment, she suggested we move on with the day, including a stop at the store before heading to dinner. We decided on Charlie's, a local steakhouse known for its food and live music. The plan felt right, a chance to step out of the shadow of the past. After running errands at the farmer's market, we returned home to prepare. For the first time in years, the house felt like more than just a shell. It felt alive. I got ready quickly, then waited for Ashley, who emerged looking stunning in a denim skirt, white blouse, and cowboy boots. She carried herself with a confidence and warmth that was magnetic. Dinner at Charlie's didn't disappoint. The steaks were perfect, the atmosphere lively, and the band set the mood. We danced through the night, two-steps, waltzes, even a line dance. During a slow dance, Ashley pulled me close and kissed me, whispering words that revealed the depth of her feelings. It was in that moment that I realized my own feelings for her had grown into something undeniable. As we wrapped up the evening, Ashley playfully hinted that the night shouldn't end on the dance floor. Her teasing warmth and affection felt like a balm for everything I had endured. We left Charlie's together, the past fading just a little more with each step we took forward. After finally arriving home, I parked the truck in the garage and shut the door behind us. Eager to leave the car, we made our way inside, where the excitement of the evening gradually gave way to a calm intimacy. Lying together on the bed, Ashley wrapped her arms around me, and I found my thoughts drifting over the whirlwind of the past 2 days. Only 36 hours earlier, I had been a broken man, consumed by the betrayal of a wife who had lied, cheated, and conspired with someone I once trusted. Now, with Ashley by my side, I was rediscovering what it meant to feel loved. Though I knew what I wanted to do next, I hesitated, worried she might think I was rushing things, but the thought of holding back didn't sit well. Gathering my courage, I reached into the nightstand and retrieved a small box. Inside was my great-grandmother's engagement ring, carefully cleaned and ready for this moment. Ashley's gaze shifted to the box in my hand as I told her about its history. The ring was more than a piece of jewelry. It symbolized a century of Jennings family resilience and love. My great-grandfather had given it to my great-grandmother before leaving to fight in World War I. Though he survived the war, exposure to gas had cut his life short. Later, the ring was passed to my grandfather, who wore it during battles in the Pacific before starting a family of his own. Eventually it came to me, a gift of tradition and hope. As I shared the story, Ashley's eyes filled with emotion. She understood its significance and what it meant for me to offer it to her. Without hesitation, she accepted the ring and promised to wear it with pride. However, she added one condition. She wanted me to reverse my vasectomy so we could have children and perhaps pass the ring on to future generations. I agreed without hesitation, slipping the ring onto her finger as we sealed the moment with a kiss. That night, we expressed our love in the most intimate way, finally falling asleep in each other's arms. The next morning, I woke to the mouth-watering aroma of bacon. After finishing my chores, I joined Ashley in the kitchen, where she had prepared another of her legendary breakfasts. We ate together, savoring the meal and the easy companionship that had become so natural between us. Later, we packed for the trip to Dallas, deciding to shower together before leaving, which inevitably led to another passionate encounter. Once we were ready, I called the kids to share the news. Putting the call on speaker, I told Brian and Jessica about our engagement. Their reactions were immediate and joyful. Brian let out a celebratory cheer while Jessica expressed her happiness and approval. My parents joined the conversation, welcoming Ashley into the family with open arms and teasing affection. My dad jokingly invited Ashley to call him Daddy, a sentiment that made everyone laugh. Before ending the call, I encouraged Brian and Jessica to visit Jolene's mother, Myrna, from time to time. Though complicated, she was still their grandmother, and I wanted them to maintain some connection with her. Both kids agreed, showing once again how thoughtful and kind-hearted they were. As we loaded up the truck for the trip back, Ashley's earlier words to my mom lingered in my mind. Curious about her plans, I asked how she envisioned managing a potential long-distance relationship. She revealed she had already taken steps to make Dallas her home, mentioning that the editor-in-chief of the local paper, the Daily Record, was retiring soon. Ashley had applied for the position and felt optimistic about her chances. She explained that her qualifications aligned perfectly with the board's goals, and she had already begun developing strategies to revitalize the paper's circulation. Even if the job didn't materialize, Ashley reassured me that she was committed to making our relationship work. Her confidence and determination were infectious, and I felt deeply grateful for her support. Together, we drove toward Dallas, ready to face whatever came next, knowing we had each other to rely on. Ashley wrapped her arms around my neck, her gaze steady and affectionate, as she expressed her relief at no longer working in a chaotic environment like the Statesman. She reflected on the toll of constant travel, late-night assignments, and living out of hotels. Moving to a smaller paper, even with a potential pay cut, felt like a chance to finally settle down and create a stable life. She mentioned other possibilities, like freelancing or writing a book, but ultimately admitted she'd prefer spending her days with me. After securing the house, we headed out. I picked a few flowers from the garden, planning a small detour. Ashley, teasing, joked about secret rendezvous, but quickly apologized, acknowledging how past betrayals lingered for both of us. I assured her the stop was about closure, not secrets. We arrived at the cemetery and stood by Jolene's marker. I placed the flowers in a nearby vase and spoke aloud, telling Jolene about my upcoming marriage to Ashley. Though she was gone, saying it aloud felt cathartic. Ashley added that, if the children agreed, she intended to adopt them. This gesture struck me deeply. As we walked back to the truck, I asked if she truly wanted to take that step. Without hesitation, Ashley affirmed that the kids deserved a trustworthy mother, and she was ready to be that person. Her commitment to my children solidified my belief that marrying her was the right choice for all of us. The drive to Dallas was mostly quiet. Ashley worked on her story while I reflected on the whirlwind of recent months. Arriving at the hotel, Ashley suggested I move into her room since her newspaper was covering the cost. I offered to split the bill, but she waved it off, suggesting I handle future date expenses instead. Reluctantly, I agreed, checked out of my room, and moved in with her. That evening, we celebrated with steak, dancing, and a passionate night together. The next morning, we arrived early at the courthouse, securing good seats as the jury returned from their hotel to begin deliberations. Ashley seamlessly balanced her role as a reporter, gathering testimony and insights from attorneys and legal experts. By early afternoon, the jury reached a decision, and anticipation filled the courtroom. At 1:30, the jury re-entered. Steve sat motionless as the foreman handed the verdict to the bailiff, who passed it to the judge. After confirming the verdict's unanimity, the judge read the outcome: guilty on all charges. The jury recommended the maximum penalty, death. Steve's attorney had gambled by letting the jury determine sentencing, hoping for leniency if the decision wasn't unanimous. That gamble failed. Steve was convicted of 6 counts of first-degree murder, 1 manslaughter charge, multiple conspiracy counts, and additional offenses involving smuggling, human trafficking, pills, and sleeping for money. The jury was polled individually, each juror affirming their agreement with the verdict. The judge addressed Steve directly, acknowledging his general reservations about the death penalty, but agreeing it was warranted in this case. He ordered Steve's transfer to Huntsville State Prison to await execution, closing with a somber invocation of mercy for Steve's soul. As the gavel fell, a sense of finality settled over the courtroom. Justice, though grim, had been served. As the court emptied, my attorney gestured for me to follow him. We caught up with the officers escorting Steve out, his hunched posture and tired eyes making him look years older. After a brief conversation with the officers, my attorney handed Steve 2 documents and instructed him to sign. Steve, clearly enraged, demanded to know what the papers were. My lawyer calmly explained. One document was a waiver relinquishing all parental rights to Brian and Jessica, while the other outlined the disposition of Steve's remaining estate. According to the will, after taxes and penalties, his assets would be divided equally among 3 parties: Myrna Carter, the mother of his late lover, the Brian Jennings Trust, and the Jessica Jennings Trust. Defeated, Steve reluctantly signed both forms. He glared at me with venom in his eyes, asking if I was satisfied. My response was blunt. I told him I would be, especially since Ashley and I were getting married, and she planned to adopt the kids. As the officers led him away, I left without looking back. That was the last I saw of Steve until his execution day. True to my word, I visited his grave afterward, ensuring it received a rather undignified farewell, though I made sure Ashley wasn't around. She wouldn't have approved. Finally, the nightmare was over, and I could look ahead to building a future with Ashley. Ashley stayed true to her promise, sharing the story she'd written about the ordeal before submitting it. Her work drew national attention, leading to appearances on several talk shows. Despite offers for a movie adaptation, she declined, but her efforts earned her a Pulitzer Prize. Though the Statesman hoped to keep her on staff, Ashley's priorities had shifted. They sent her off with a generous bonus and glowing recommendations. The Daily Record eagerly welcomed her as their new managing editor. Under her leadership, the paper's circulation tripled in its first year, prompting an expansion that included a new building and additional staff. When it came to our wedding, we opted for a simple backyard ceremony surrounded by family and friends. Ashley's parents made the trip from Austin, along with close colleagues from the Statesman. Her father proudly walked her down the aisle, warmly shaking my hand as he entrusted her to me. Brian served as my best man, while Jessica stood beside Ashley as her maid of honor, making it a celebration of our new family. After we exchanged vows, the minister turned us to face our loved ones, announcing us as Mr. and Mrs. William Jennings. The applause was thunderous, but the most meaningful moment came when Brian wrapped his arm around Ashley, welcoming her as his mom. Jessica quickly joined in, declaring her love for her new mother. Tears streamed down Ashley's face as she hugged them both. My dad then approached with an envelope containing tickets for a week-long Caribbean cruise. It was his way of sending us off on our new adventure together. We thanked him, laughing at the perfect gift to mark the start of our life as a family. 10 months later, Ashley gave birth to twins, a boy, William Frederick, named for my grandfather, and a girl, Alicia Marie, named for Ashley's grandmother. On the day they were born, I happened to run into George Mason, a prominent local politician. After congratulating me and accepting a celebratory cigar, he mentioned that an upcoming election had sparked conversations about me stepping into Steve's old commission seat. The idea of me, the man who had brought Steve down, filling his role carried poetic justice. I laughed off the suggestion, citing the financial strain of feeding 2 newborns. George pressed further, suggesting I could still manage my business while serving. My answer was simple, reflecting a lesson learned through painful experience. As my father had once reminded me, power corrupts,